That would be a dark joke. Who's the RFK Jr. of the NWSL?
Oh. Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals, Your Team Sucks edition. I am your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. Yeah, we thought we had a plan to get into a couple of lower table clubs who we've avoided talking about, as well as address some things going on at Bay FC, because we haven't really taken a deep dive on them. And then everything went to hell across the weekend of fixtures, where Orlando looked down for the count and then stormed back to victory. North Carolina got their first win of the year at a last gasp 3-2 win. Washington was pummeled, but maybe not as pummeled as it looked like. San Diego started 3 kids who haven't graduated high school and still beat the snot out of Chicago. And Louisville blew it at the very last second against Portland in a 3-3 draw. So it was utter madness.
I think there have been a lot of concerns about potentially the stratification of this league. And this was the weekend where the NWSL reminded us, still chaotic, still capable of really surprising results.
What I'll say first is that it might feel like the good old days of NWSL chaos this past weekend represented. Mm-hmm. But I want people to remember there is a pretty stratified spread of points through the first 6 games of every NWSL season. So whatever chaos you are imagining or whatever levels of parity you believe tend to emerge as the season goes on. What was weird about last year was that the really strong stratification of the top 4 from everybody else got put in place and then just stuck around for 26 games. Right now, yes, this weekend was crazy and Orlando almost lost and Kansas City did lose at the last second and Washington got pounded and blah, blah, blah. The spread of points, if you're using the Gini coefficient of points, the spread of points is still pretty stratified, where there is a top 4 still and there is a bottom 3 of teams that really stink, at least on results right now. I'm going to say that this was a data point, but it doesn't necessarily augur any trends. And we'll have to wait for a little while to decide if we are back to 2023 or we're back to 2024 in terms of how chaos and parity express itself across the league.
This feels like old Greek-Roman theater where the servants became master for a day as a weekend, as opposed to some sort of sea change in how we're going. I still think both of us believe that this season will look more like last season than 2023 when it's all said and done. That doesn't mean we're not capable of some truly surprising results and some truly dumb results, because that's just the nature of this beast. That's just the game. It just happens this way. But without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start with some teams that we just haven't had enough time to dig in on and whether they suck or not. And we're going to use their matchups as that apparatus and continue on from there. So, Houston, Utah. Houston, your team sucks because blank.
A lack of talent, I think. We've been saying it all year. Fabrice Gautrat seems to have hit on a version of a 3-4-3 that he seems to like, that allows for numbers in the center of the pitch to at least try and get a fairly even matchup there. He's using Ryan Garris and Avery Patterson as his wing backs to create some width. Maggie Graham now seems to be his preferred option as either a winger or as a wing back, but as some sort of wide attacking force. They manage a fair bit of control over games so long as they're not up against a team that has a really strong talent advantage. I mean, this game was terrible to watch. And it was mostly due to the fact that both of these teams kind of just aren't very good. And the compression of their shapes is such that so much of the field isn't getting used because both teams don't really have the ability to either break the other team's lines or even just control passes with any kind of cleanliness or consistency. And so you just see this really, really tight level of compression where we didn't get our first quality chance until the 50th minute.
Houston, your team sucks because it's just not fun to watch. More than anything else, I actually think another way to put this is, Houston, your team sucks less than last year, where they may have been inherently more chaotic games, but they've been able to exercise a level of control that hasn't, turned into a particularly entertaining team. That said, I look at little things like they're beating their opposition when it comes to getting touches in the box. They're kind of mid-table when it comes to expected points as opposed to their actual point total. They are more talented than they have been in the past, but boy, there are just still so many holes here. It's just a work in progress. There is a question of whether Gautrat has correctly assessed the amount of talent on hand and has tailored his game. They really feel like a mid-table Serie A team that just wants to play a lot of 1-0s. They are not dissimilar in the way they express themselves than an under-talented Laura Harvey Seattle team of recent years. They aren't giving up a ton, and they aren't creating a ton, and they are counting on that little marginal advantage that they can gain really carrying them through. And you know what? Against Utah, it did. Delaney Sheehan Wonder Strike, it's a hell of a hit, is the difference in this game. But on XG, they kind of lost it mildly to Utah. And their best chances, came almost immediately from the jump and then later on. Aren't the Sheehan chance. It was a lot of stifle ball and a Wonder Strike. Given the talent on hand in Houston, it's aesthetically unpleasing, but I don't necessarily think it's the worst strategy from Gautrat.
I think that's probably right. I mean, you want to talk about a mid-table Serie A side, like a 3-4-3 is perfect for that. You just load, you got 4 players in the middle that you can play very narrowly and just grind other teams into dust. You're right. I mean, that is keeping their defensive performance in pretty decent shape. You got to give them credit for that. It's just not a particularly entertaining watch, and it's probably not going to be something you can expect long-term to be successful with. I don't know what Diana Ordonez's status is right now. She started a week ago, and she came off the bench this time, but I think...
Got a great chance, too.
Good chance at the back end of the game, and I think that is probably someone who can do a lot of your off-ball running and try and do some backline stretching in a way that Messiah Bright kind of can't, because Messiah Bright is so much more of a hold-up player. And I think that if you want to find a little bit of spark, trying to get Yasmin Ryan and Diana Ordonez combining, I think would be useful. And whether it's just you're 6 weeks in, you had a lot of roster turnover, and you have a new head coach, and this is just a betting in process that actually is going to take a long time, okay, that's fine. I don't think anybody expected Houston to make the playoffs legitimately. It's not very pleasant, but also maybe that's just sort of where they're at. And it won't be this way forever. We'll see.
It seems like Houston has some self-knowledge. And that self-knowledge is, we have a lot to work on. And while we are working on it, we're going to suck to watch.
Yeah, this 3-4-3 is a recent wrinkle. This is just of the last 2 or 3 games. So that might be what Gautrat is thinking. Just keeping them tight, compact, and miserable. Speaking of miserable.
Utah, your team sucks. And I think we have less complimentary things to say in this regard. Your team sucks because so many people are injured. You've not really been able to execute a top-line team. Some of your most crucial pieces, like Claudia Zornoza, are aging.
And Zornoza is added to the list of injuries going out in the first half of that. So that's very concerning. Like, who the hell is going to even make any attempt at advancing the ball? I know that CeCe Kaiser went straight into the starting 11 after signing with Utah, which is interesting, but I don't know of anybody else who has a sense of trying to get players the ball. It's a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. Aisha Solorzano hasn't popped. Sentner is still doing pretty Sentner-y things. They don't have a lot of flexibility or options, and Jimmy Coonrotz is doing the opposite of what Fabrice Gautrat is, which is, let's still try and continue to play front foot and play open.
They win the box touches battle 17-16. 17 is not a ton of box touches, but it's a lot better than their league worst 10.5 box touches per 96 minutes, which is really abysmal. If you want to score goals, you kind of need to get in the box more than 10 or 11 touches a game. You're kind of dead in the water if you're not doing that. They are toothless in attack and not their former selves in defense. If Houston has shown self-knowledge in its talent level, Utah is really straining to understand how limited they are and really haven't cultivated game plans. They have points because they got a 10th minute of injury time penalty. Chicago's really bad, but this is right there with the worst team in the league. There's not like a happy, quick resolution here or like steps forward that solve this problem.
Yeah, the only thing you can do is ask for players to get healthy. And it's not in Jimmy Kuhnratz's control or Kelly Cousins' control.
Or to invest in the summer. They're going through a team sale. All the hope and promise of this offseason is being extinguished as we speak. This league is messy enough that Utah may only need to catch like a really hot streak to grab a last playoff spot, but like you're starting to look at situations that are extreme outliers for them getting into the playoffs. And that's frankly not something I thought we would be saying only 6 weeks into the season about this team.
I also think that Kuhnratz needs to be a little bit more honest with himself about where his players' strengths lie. Like he flipped Mazingo and Sentner's sides of the field. Mazingo traditionally is on the right, Sentner's traditionally on the left. I imagine that was because he thought he saw a matchup between Sentner and Garrison Westphal that he thought he could exploit, but it didn't work. Sentner loves cutting in on her strong foot. For whatever else you want to say about her, is actually like quite good at that when she's trying to open up space entering the final third that way. And just did not get out of second gear against Houston on Friday. Kuhnrauz needs to have a little bit of a come to Jesus moment with that too. You're so thin on talent at the moment. Get your players in their best spots. Give yourself every possible advantage.
Now to some slightly less doom and gloom. Bay Seattle, we'll take a look at this. Bay, your team sucks because
you feel like you have no other choice than to start Caroline Conti as your center forward.
Yeah, boy. Your team sucks because from the advertised discernible style that they wanted to play from day one of this season, we are so removed from that. And while the individual talent exists on Bay, what have they been relying on? Kiki Pickett bangers and Rachel Kundananji's individual brilliance. And frankly, that's gotten them some points. But this looks like a less cohesive team than we were watching at the end of last season. I'm really concerned that the best laid plans of Bay just aren't good and aren't coming together as we speak.
We've talked about it. We don't know why Penelope Hawking has been relegated to the bench. She didn't even play against Seattle at all. And we remarked in preseason that this squad was top heavy and it got thin once you got to the benches. And we're seeing that play out. They're probably starting as close to an ideal 11 as you can, barring one or two positions. But Taylor Huff has cooled off from those first couple of games. Looked sharp at times against Seattle and like had a good chance herself. But that just means your chance creation issues in central areas is still a problem, which we kind of suspected it would be if Huff didn't pan out. Not to say that she won't. And then like if you can't trust Oshwala to go 90 minutes anymore, or even 75 minutes, Conti is next player up. That's a problem. Credit to their faith in Kiki Pickett's defensive abilities, that they thought she could rock as a single pivot. And honestly, against Seattle, you probably can. Just to give yourself some more progression options further up the field by getting Dorian Bailey advanced. It wasn't like a terrible performance. 1.55 to 1.0 non-penalty XG in their favor. It just didn't feel like it held a great deal of consistency wire to wire. And again, you saw how besides Kundananji's goal, which itself wasn't a great chance, you're really kind of only looking at that ball over the top sequence that ends in the diagonal from Kundananji to release Huff that you can say is a truly quality moment in attack from them.
The big thing here is I just haven't seen any real progression from last season. Yeah. There wasn't a ton of squad turnover, and you'd hope that you'd get some sort of bonus from these players being pretty familiar with each other. And instead, we're just seeing kind of more of the same uninspired football from Bay. It's not got to be a lot of fun to be a Bay FC supporter right now, watching, knowing that essentially you're probably not capable of beating a team by multiple goals or really controlling or dominating a game. They're just so solidly mid-table. What was once a ceiling you could dream about feels like it's much lower than it was. The floor potentially is lower than I think we considered preseason as well. the hope that Oshuala would really come back in and, figure it out year 2. I have no idea what you're able to get out of her from here, and it's really upsetting to watch. There's like a smart player there, but she just looks cooked. That sucks. The non-penalty XG differential per game right now, Bay is 9th. There's not a lot to look at and feel great about.
Yeah.
And that ceiling has dropped considerably. Seattle, do you suck?
It's an okay performance from them. They did what they always do, which is not generate a whole hell of a lot of offense. But Jordan Huitema did get 3 good looks at goal, one of which she just totally biffed after being gifted a miscontrolled pass from Joelle Anderson. You talked about this during the game, just like how illustrative it was that Huitema dithered in the box on the ball too long and gave Jordan Silkowitz a chance to make the save. And then a minute later, Kundananji turns around and beats 2 center backs on the counter to get a through ball and slot her pinball shot.
Unbelievable shot.
And it's also interesting that like the goal that Huitema scores is like a header from a cross in the second phase of a corner kick.
Totally.
She's got the strength and she's got the hops to lose her marker and gain some space and finish decent service with her forehead. But honestly, I don't think that's the most important thing a center forward should be able to do. It's nice to have, but it would be even better if she could slough players off the shoulder, she could run in behind, if she could even do some like fairly decent hold-up play for others. Like it's a very moribund attack from Seattle, as it has been for a couple of years now, and it's not getting better. They've gotten 2 pretty important results for their table position between the derby last week and then saving this draw this week, but I don't know, they're just very uninspiring.
They've failed to convince, even though they've been getting decent results, that they have any sort of ability to control and win a game, whether that be Kansas City style control, where you're allowing the opposition a fair amount of the ball and then just punching them, or that be more possession heavy kind of control. The thing that blew my mind on the broadcast was hearing that Laura Harvey has described Jordan Huitema not as a goal scorer, but as a creator.
Yeah.
That's just like so insane, like on so many levels. In some ways, what we saw was like the best expression of what Huitema is in this game, which is like lump the ball up, let her height advantage do what it does, stick her up front. Even though she scored, the limitations are just so abundantly clear. But also, Seattle doesn't have like better choices to fill in there.
Yeah.
If you or I were managing Seattle right now, I think we would both probably eventually settle on either completely rethinking the system or starting Jordan Huitema. That's why your team sucks.
Well, they have adjusted the system a little bit. I mean, she played 3-5-2.
Totally.
And instead of having Darlene be a winger, Darlene played as a wing back on the left. But the numerical advantage that afforded Seattle in the center of the park was a stagnant one, because they weren't able to release a lot of that midfield control into Biondolo and Huitema. Biondolo didn't really have any good looks at goal at all.
No.
You have to bear in mind that even with a system change, if you don't have the personnel to make it fluid and make it threatening, then it doesn't really matter if you're playing with 2 center backs at 3.
I think a lot of what we've said about Bay probably holds for Seattle too, just like the ceiling is not that high with the current composition of players. The floor might be a little higher than Bay's, but the ceiling is...
I think Biondolo only got 1 touch in the box in 89 minutes.
It's nuts. She looked divorced from the game plan against Bay. And I think some of that was the way Bay was keying on her. And I think, some of it's new team and new system, but neutering one of the best attackers in league history, Seattle should be primarily concerned with figuring out how to unlock a healthy Lynn Williams to help them create goals. And so far, they have not done that.
Yeah.
You know who doesn't suck? Jordan Bugg. Jordan Bugg looks the real deal.
Fantastic performance. And again, the big reason why that Oshuala chance came to absolutely nothing.
All right, let's move on and start talking about some spicy. Let's just get there. Let's go. North Carolina. Your team still sucks. I don't care that you beat Kansas City.
Well, I'll give Sean Nahas this. they adjusted their tactics.
Totally.
And there was more action in the central. There was more action in the center of the park for Ashley Sanchez than there has previously been so far this year. It's an interesting idea to play a 3-4-3 to try and get Shaw and Sanchez more of those central touches, whereas what we had been advocating all year is for a box midfield to get them in central areas. I thought that was interesting. It didn't really give them a lot of quality chances to speak of, despite the scoreline. It was a decent defensive performance against Kansas City, I think, generally speaking. So maybe there's something there. But if you are asking your front three to be some combination of Shaw and Sanchez playing underneath a single center forward, and that being Monica Matsukubo, that's still three players who just don't want to run into the box very often. It's not generally what their game is. I don't know if this is a long-term answer. Did you buy the comeback? Did you see something in that back end of the game that you could say, oh, that's not just game state, they actually are doing something well here?
No. I'll give Sean Nahas credit in the way that you did too. I would describe the formation that they're playing as a 3-4-2-1.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
Because I think there is distinction there.
Sure.
And I appreciate that there is a level of self-knowledge and cleverness. This is getting you toward a box midfield, just using your wing play differently and using your allocation of defenders differently. In a traditional 3-4-2-1, there is the shape of that two levels of two central midfielders. Right. I'm going to give him full credit for that. What I'm not going to give a lot of credit for is generating only 1.0 XG at home. You're not going to win a lot of games still with a below water substandard attack. This was the first time we've seen Ashley Sanchez look even a little bit like Ashley Sanchez this season. We still have not seen Jaden Shaw look like Jaden Shaw. And so maybe it's coming, but you got 2 goals from defenders in this game and game statey bounce at the end. Granted, you chased the game. This is closer to what I think North Carolina can be, but it's still not that good. Kansas City, frankly, came in and kind of rotated their squad and took this one a little light. That's their mistake. But this felt more like a Kansas City mulligan than it did like some comprehensive victory and containment of...
Yeah, I mean, it's not totally Vlatko's mistake. I mean, Michelle Cooper wasn't available. You had to get Haley Hopkins in there. You're without Debinha as well, who was only cleared for a half. I don't know how much to take from this other than that the downside of hit the gas and then hit the brakes approach that Kansas City has sometimes means that you're going to rear end somebody when you hit the brakes. Because that occasionally happened to them last year, especially at the beginning of the season when they weren't all clicking together yet, that you could let in some late goals. And so they let in a couple of kind of dumb late goals.
To finish out the Carolina point, again, to their credit, a back three is a really smart way to defend against Kansas City's front three.
Yeah.
In this particular instance, there's a great job done limiting the effectiveness of Temwa Chawinga, a thing that we've seen with varying degrees of success this season. I mean, I think teams are just much more keyed in on her. You know, she's still got an assist, but the back three did neutralize her ability to score. This does feel like, in the case of North Carolina, it's a great result. I don't want to minimize that. It's a great result that I don't have a ton of faith is like the corner turned proof of Nahas ball. We're going to need to see them start beating teams by more than scrappy, scruffy, late game statey chasing the game goals. Right. Given the quality of chances they created, it's very easily could have gone another direction. They needed this win badly. I just don't think this win says very much about the tide turned. All right, Kansas City, your team sucks. Does it? Does it even suck, Evan?
No, not really. I mean, I think they went to sleep at the wrong time in the back end of the game, and that's not good, and you need to clean that up. But otherwise, I think it was fine. I mean, I think what Andonovski might have to ask of his coaching staff and his players is just to figure out how to get Chawinga more time and more space on the ball, because she's now had a couple of games, maybe even 3 in a row, where she has not generated a whole lot of XG from her chances. And who knows what that might mean going forward anyway, because she had to get pulled at halftime for an injury, which is its own problem that you've just been running her into the ground since she showed up last year, the amount of playing time that she has in her legs. So I hope that it isn't anything super serious or long term. But if she goes down, then it's not the end of the world because B is healthy now. Debinha will be coming back to the starting 11. Cooper will be coming back. It won't be the end of the world. You just might not be beating the shit out of people the way that you were to start the year.
One of the things we saw in this game, and these have been the elements of hesitation I have had about Kansas City, the bench depth could be better than it is right here. And you lose a Chewinga. I'm sorry, Mary Long off the bench. What is the thought there in a game like this? I think Vlatko said something to the effect of, you just really can't take a minute off in this league.
Yeah.
And he's right. And this felt like the game that Kansas City sort of took off and just wanted to manage. For the first 50 minutes, did a fine job of that. Then let in a Ryan Williams goal, fine. Immediately came back, pounced, got it, but did let off at the end. That's some finishing luck. Caught a bad break, but frankly, Kansas City benefited from finishing luck in this game as well. They are still beating teams by over an XG a game that portends very good results. I worry that this assemblage of 30-somethings on who they are relying maybe don't have the gas to go the distance.
Yeah,
will need to be managed.
It was the one question we had in preseason as well.
Yeah.
Debinha has proved us wrong so far in that regard. Bio has looked pretty sharp, working her way back. I don't think the sky is falling, but it is something to monitor. Like a lot of these results that we're talking about, the results or the manner in which the results occurred kind of don't really tell you much about who these teams actually are.
I think that's fair. The Washington Spirit. Boy, what a weekend for Michelle Kang.
No joke.
Just crushing defeats on both sides of the Atlantic. Washington, does your team suck? The Trinity Rodman situation sucks. Jonathan Heraldo's behavior sucks. Boy, that guy just really can't lose with any grace. He just becomes a little turd.
I know, and he's the size of a little turd, so it kind of fits.
This game, man, this is like finishing luck 101. What do you think? Why does Washington suck? Do they suck?
I mean, I think it does bear repeating that they are not looking the best on underlying performances in the aggregate. I mean,
Totally.
They're essentially like mid-table. The defense is underwater. The attack is doing fine, but it's not always balancing out. And a lot of that is from a very game-statey XG split, because if you take out basically the last 20 minutes, like most of their XG disappears. The reason that Gotham looked so good is not necessarily because they were getting great chances. They were getting a lot of good finishing, but not necessarily great chances. They were locking Washington down until about minute 70. And then at that point, Washington was down 3-0 and had to throw everything they had at the wall. Kouassi got to see the field. Bethune had her cameo as mandated by the training staff. So you would assume that we're going to see more of Kouassi and Bethune. And that really does reset things. And you probably will see Hatch back in the 11, as cool as Gift Monday has been in flashes. That should help right the ship. But it's actually more like the defensive stuff that I'm a little worried about.
Yeah. They've overperformed their performances so far. And I kind of think it doesn't matter, because you just saw how powerful Rose Kouassi is the minute you get her on the field. I know that we talk about game state a lot too, but Rose Kouassi's state was its own thing. Washington has just been playing with one arm tied behind their back for most of this season. And I think it has caused diminished effectiveness around goal in terms of their ability to create, and has put undue pressure on a talented but not perfect back line. And those two things have led to some pretty lackluster performances. That said, even without Rodman, Bethune and Kouassi are just clear starters.
Not every team can generate more than an XG in 20 minutes plus stoppage time. Even when the game state is dictating that direction of performance, it's hard to do, especially when you're up against the top four side. So Rose Kouassi got 5 touches in the box in a half. I don't think they suck, but
I definitely don't think Washington's.
I just want to see some consistent 90-minute performances with better players on the field, if that can happen, in order to make sure that this run of points that they've been able to bank while their best players are hurt can continue, can sustain itself.
Count your blessings. Enjoy that. Like, that is potentially the difference down the stretch of, like, winning the Shield because you overperformed in tough times and not. Also, like, Ashley Hatch, she looks great. She looks reborn. Washington Spirit, you have been sucky, but you decidedly don't suck. Yep. Gotham. Oh, does Gotham suck? Or are they just pure chaotic?
No, they don't suck. They are a little bit chaotic. I mean, everybody likes talking about Esther right now because she's got, 3 braces in the last 4 games, and she's in the Golden Boot lead with 7 goals after only 6 matches. Like, that's a big deal. But the header off the corner kick comes from a bit of good fortune. You're not going to get as many penalties as you've been getting recently, so bear that in mind. We love Esther. I don't think she's winning the MVP, and I'm not sure she's winning the Golden Boot, which we've talked about in the past. So this was just Gotham riding a hot hand over the weekend. And there's nothing wrong with that. They had a tough game midweek that they got shellacked. So let that flush itself from your mouth and move forward.
We've talked about Gotham a fair amount here. This is a perfect example of, like, capitalizing on the game state. Obviously, they let Washington create a fair amount in the second half, but they were up 3-0. Yeah. Esther she's in a purple patch, but good players get those more often than other players. If she only scores 3 or 4 goals for the rest of the season, that's still a great outlay for her over the course of the season.
Looking under the hood, she is one of, I think she's like top 4, top 5 in XG per 96. She's making it count. I'm not going to say that she's not going to keep that going, but other players will pick up some steam, and she's not going to score all of those great chances the way that she's been doing so far.
I think the inconsistency of performance, again, I'm not going to ding you that hard for what happened in Portland, because it is sandwiched in between 2 wins. You had a terrible week with some terrible travel, and you got 6 points from 3 road games.
Yeah.
All of them in hostile environments. Angel City, Portland, DC, that is 3 of the 4 attendance leaders. They are what we continue to think they are. They're kind of the 3rd or 4th best team in this league.
Yeah, Jace and Gabi Portillo as your wingers, I think, is fun. Using Szczepanski as the 10 is fun. Interesting that they trusted Braninia at right back. Maybe you thought she wouldn't be too exposed because it was Courtney Brown on the wing, but I think she needs to be just used more. Just trust the player who is built to play that position, even if it's potentially a defensive risk.
Also, Jalen Howell continues to be excellent. Gotham's in good shape. They don't suck. Chicago sucks.
Chicago does suck.
Maybe not as much as this game against San Diego suggests in its raw scoreline, but we could be brief about Chicago. I just don't have... There is, like, so little positive to draw from them. You know, last or second to last in almost everything.
Yeah.
What is going on? The counter argument here is the harder one. Is there anything you want to extract that is good about Chicago?
Not really. Jamise Joseph has flashed some quality, but it's nowhere near enough. Was San Diego good for it for 3 goals? No, they weren't. But Chicago didn't create anything in the other direction. And then poor Sam Staub has to suffer an own goal on top of it all. Your heart breaks. Like, Carrie Riccaro was in the post-match presser after the game. She concluded basically just by saying, like, keep rooting for us. I was like, ooh, girl, that is brutal, man.
This was another one of Alyssa Nair's less than sterling performances as well. Staub gets the own goal, but I think Nair's just as culpable for that. Adriana Leon, it's a great piece of reading the game to grab that rebound, but also, like, Nair's got to be pushing that out of bounds.
Yeah.
It's rough. They really miss Mal Swanson, but I also think it would be fair to say that no amount of Mal Swanson solves these problems right now. These problems are greater than Mal Swanson.
You may have picked up a couple more results with Swanson in the lineup, but that's kind of as far as it goes.
San Diego, team sucks. Evan, does it? Why?
I don't know if they suck. I don't know if they're necessarily as good as some of these performances have made them appear. They're in the positive column on XG differential per game. That's a good sign. They are going out there and starting 3 17-year-olds, which got a lot of news. but I don't know if that's necessarily like a good thing. Respect to Kimi Ascanio. Is that your best option at number 9? Like, I think Leon probably should still be getting that job. Same thing with Maria Sanchez out on the wing instead of Melanie Barcenas. This felt pretty steady as she goes. They controlled the match from basically beginning to end and capitalized on some pretty dumb mistakes by Chicago at the end of it. And Gia Corley continued to be a really bright spot for a team that needs them.
They're an interesting collection of talent that is being used pretty well, but also the underlying on their performances so far is of a team that is much more mid-table than the team that sort of has put up 1.7 points per game. They're not a particularly good attacking team. They're 9th in non-penalty expected goals per game. Their differential is positive, but it's not so positive. They're 5th. I think they're still lightweight. Don't get on the hype train too quickly with them.
Yeah, and we have to check ourselves on that too, because we, I think, have gotten on the hype train at points. At least I have in the last couple of seasons. In the last couple of weeks, just because you're just looking for interesting teams outside the top 4 to talk about. And they're interesting. And I'll say, like, they're 5th on XG differential per game and 10th on expected points. And that's mostly to do with the fact that they've conceded 3 penalties or conceded 3 penalty attempts. And so expected points factors that in, whereas obviously we're only looking at the non-penalty XG version of that. Just a note. One thing that you can say about them is that they're basically getting the job done fairly consistently. Their schedule is not going to allow for that for the next 20 weeks, but I am starting to see kind of a plan, and I'm starting to see sort of a core group that is starting to gel. Again, Corley, Cascarino, Dali, and Sanchez, I think, are just a quartet that's really starting to learn each other's patterns and like look pretty fluid when they have the ball in good areas. I don't think it's wrong to feel a little bit optimistic about San Diego. It's wrong to say that like somehow they might get a playoff game at home.
They're definitely a better team than either of us have thought. I think Idaval's doing a nice job. This game encapsulates a lot of how I think their season has been perceived, which is to say it was a close XG battle that turned into a 3-0 victory. And the 3-0 victory is the mirage. The close XG battle is not.
Sure. Whatever belief you may have in chaos and parity coming back, it shows up in games like this where the talent gap is much, much smaller. I mean, Chicago's bad, but San Diego's closer to Chicago than they are to Orlando. This sort of thing can happen.
Oh my God. Let's do Orlando. Orlando, your team sucks. It doesn't suck at all.
This is a game that demonstrated how coaching actually can make a difference, I think, because the team didn't play well in the first half. And Angel City got some finishing luck on their side to get those 2 goals, especially the Riley Tiernan goal. But they had a plan, and they stuck to it. They just turned the screw slowly, bit by bit, knowing that Angel City, this is what they do. They are going to expose themselves in not smart ways, and you can get them on the counterattack. Oh, by the way, we've decided we're pressing in the attacking half now this year, we being Orlando. So all we got to do is just wait for our moment. Just keep pushing, keep prodding, and then spring. And spring they did.
In some ways, it's one of their worst performances in a while, and they still gutted it out and got the points. What I mean is, this is a team that just looked unbothered down 2-0. Yeah. And like with the confidence, like even with stuff not working, we'll get there. We'll figure it out. And they did. And I think that to me is so impressive after trailing. Banda, boy, she's just getting fouled everywhere and not getting calls in the same way. The memo is out about like force the refs into calls.
What's so annoying is that we'll really get into it with Portland, Louisville, but like this was the weekend of fouls. Everybody was getting fouls, and somehow Barbara Banda could not get a foul called against her marker.
There is just a really ugly element to that. And still, in spite of all of that, Oyan looked great. They just have so many weapons. Boy, it's a cheat code bringing Carson Pickett off the bench. Yeah. You're right. They just turned the screw. They just kept doing it until Angel City just collapsed under the weight of Orlando.
Mike Watts said on the broadcast, if anyone thinks chaos has left this league, I'm like, all right, we saw some of that as the weekend transpired. I don't really think this was the game. The better team won, and the better team won at home. I think Orlando just played smart and Angel City didn't. And if there's one thing that you can give Angel City grace on, it's just that like they were flying west to east, and that's never easy. They had a game plan to try and jump Orlando early in the first half. Like they were pressing the shit out of Sams and Nadanner, trying to keep them off balance. They brought Corey Dyke back into the starting 11, and they just looked to unsettle their shape with also Priska Chilufya getting her first start, I believe. It did work. I mean, like Tiernan's chance is like not a high XG chance.
She hits the snot out of it, but yeah, it's a low.
Yeah, and like Zellem's chance is the same deal. So I don't think Angel City necessarily put themselves in the best position to play 90 minutes, but there are also reasons behind that. Now, through Friday's game, since 2022, since Angel City came into existence, they have dropped points from winning or drawing positions. They have dropped a total of 49 points.
Jeez.
That is 16 more points than the second worst team in that time span.
Oh my!
If you go on a per 26 game season, they are averaging 17 dropped points per 26 game season since their inception, which is also the worst. And what makes it really poignant is that when you look at this leaderboard, there are good teams and bad teams on either side of it, but the reason Utah has some of the fewest amount of drop points is because they're never playing with a lead or playing from a drawing position that isn't 0-0. Whereas like Orlando and Gotham are at the top of that because they do play with leads all the time and they know how to control games. Angel City is the only team who has an above average number of minutes playing with a lead or playing with a non-0-0 draw after the 75th minute, while also playing with that level of drop points. So they are getting themselves into a position where they could control the game and win points, and then they don't do it. And this crosses 3 different head coaches. This crosses 3 different general managers. This crosses multiple different lineup combinations, new players, old players, players who have been there since the beginning, players who are just showing up now. For whatever excuses you want to make specifically about Friday as an individual data point, it also just fits perfectly into the broader picture that you have to paint about them.
So many of these things are self-inflicted. And I think that continued to be true against Orlando, and few teams are better at inflicting wounds if you give them the opportunity than Orlando. I think if you'd offered Angel City a 2-2 draw before the game, they would have shaken your hand and walked away with a point. That said, Angel City, your team sucks because it doesn't know how to see out a result.
You know, every team talks about their club identity. Like, it just wouldn't be Angel City if this didn't happen.
In the global senses you've laid out, yeah, maybe make a mountain out of a molehill here. But also, in this particular game, that team's just better than you.
Yeah.
It took an unusual amount of time for the scoreline to reflect the talent difference.
The reason things were going well in the first half is because you were counter-pressing with coordination, with speed, and with flair. And that kept Orlando on their heels. And then as the game went on, you ran out of gas and you lost cohesion.
The game turned not because Alana Kennedy went off, like Carson Pickett came on. You just had more talented distribution options.
Yeah. And Oyane as well.
Because this abundance of weapons was available. Alana Kennedy has very serious limitations. She was not propping up that ship, and she was also not going to stop the leaking.
Yeah, you brought on Madison Hammond and Megan Reed, whereas the other side got to bring on Carson Pickett, Allie Watt, and Haley McCutcheon. Like, what do you expect? And you're on the road, so whatever.
Man, Orlando is just so well run, and that allows them to literally run over teams even when they spot them 2 goals.
Yep.
Our last... God, in a weekend of chaotic games, the most chaotic game.
Yeah. Yeah, and the last game of the weekend as well. I mean, it was what a capper.
Portland, 3. Louisville, 3. Portland, 3 on 0.6 non-penalty XG. Louisville, 3 on 2.8 non-penalty XG. Jesus Christ.
And even if you take out the Kayla Fisher tap-in, they're still basically at like 2 XG. Louisville is, you know? So it's not as if like that is all being propped up by a single chance. Like in the first half, they owned Portland from beginning to end. And I don't know quite what to make of that. I mean, it helps that Taylor Flint was back.
Boy, she's good.
She's such a talent, and at this point, rapidly moving into the category of underrated talents. Whereas maybe like at the start of her career, you would say maybe she's a hair overrated, but she has become just one of the most effective two-way central mids in the league. And if you want to talk about a player who actually did demonstrate giving the team a measure of control, it would be her. And DeMello, at least to my eye test, I'd have to really like drill down on the data here, but it felt like that was DeMello's best performance in like a year. So maybe that's overstating it, but like it kind of didn't feel that way.
No, she was electric.
Yeah.
Louisville, your team remarkably, it sucks in that like you just aren't getting the support you need and the attention you need. But boy, when you have everyone healthy, the three-pronged attack of Sonis, Sears, and DeMello just provides so many different ways to make Kayla Fisher look like a valuable starter in this league. Your team sucks because Ari Borges is going to miss a bunch of games for shoving a referee. The defense is still a problem.
And Katie Lund is still a problem, which is something I did not imagine I'd ever say. I don't think we can avoid it anymore. She was even listed as questionable with a hip issue, and then she starts the game. If it is true that Becky Morgan in our preseason preview told us that like she was kind of carrying a knock last year, how is this going to get any better?
Yeah.
You know, like you look at at least by ASA's model, you look at her shot stopping data for 2022 and 2023, she's the best shot stopping keeper in the league. If you look at 2024 and what we have so far from 2025, she's the worst.
It's not like an AD French level collapse, but it's not a terrible comp that I've made either. Yeah. It's really that she was so above the standard that this fall is noticeable, but it's bad.
I was just saying, I don't think the story of the game really is either of these teams.
The ref really just had himself a horrible day. You could hear Jill Lloyden call out for Jen Cooper on the broadcast, asking if this was the most fouls ever committed in an NWSL game. And that was when it was at 37, not at its final 41. Right. And the final fouls are doozies.
Yeah. One of the final fouls like swung the result. We have a ref and a guy who helps educate refs in the ASA community, and he broke down everything, all 41 calls and some non-calls. Mm-hmm. And his takeaway was, the Fleming pen call actually probably was right. It was just very, very difficult to see because the level of hip-to-hip contact, just the cameras weren't quite getting it on the couple of angles that were being replayed on the broadcast a lot. But if you dig under the hood and actually take the time, in other words, use VAR for what it was intended, it was a legitimate call. Also, he said the biggest problem was that you got to start showing cards with that many fouls. Right. And then the other subtle part was like, he wasn't talking to players after fouls. One more and I'm carding you, or take it easy, like chill out, or like bringing the two captains together and it's like, get your players under control. That wasn't happening. And that is also in a like sort of unsung or under-heralded element of how referees like keep games in line. And it was very clear that this game wasn't in line. 41 fouls and you don't see a yellow card for a player on the pitch while the game is going on until second half stoppage time is when that yellow gets flashed. Mm-hmm. Both coaches got yellows. An assistant Louisville coach got sent off. And then, of course, Ari Borges, after final whistle, shoves the ref and is going to face a multi-game suspension. Like, this game was messy. And then the series of events that led to the penalty call for the end of the game were so drawn out and so confusing and were the result of one event, but an event that had happened minutes before. And so we're like trying to wind the clock back. It was hard to eventually get a clear picture of like what was going on. When you don't manage the game well, that's when you really kind of show your ass as a referee. It's not necessarily like calling a foul that wasn't a foul or giving a no call to something that was clearly a foul. Like, you actually have to manage the flow and let players understand these are the parameters here. This is what's allowed and this is what is not allowed. It's like in baseball. It's like hitters always talk about how like, I don't care if you're calling the low strike below my knees. Just tell me that that's what's happening in the game and I'll adjust. What I can't stand is the low strike is being called and then it's a ball the next at bat. And that's what was going on. You didn't have any sense of consistency about what referee Corbin May was doing out there.
it was a startling job of not solving the problem as it occurred. Like, these teams were being chippy with each other, creating such a staccato rhythm to the game, but also understanding that with each subsequent foul not carded, that, hey, the guy may have left his yellow card somewhere. Levels of just kick him. That was a viable approach to shut down to otherwise quite fluid attacking teams and caused a lot of problems. I think that to zoom back out on this, I think there are fair arguments to both Portland penalties, but a bad refereeing job is going into extra time with 3 minutes on the board and ending the game at the 101st minute. Yeah. Like, just so out of control at that point. Yeah. Louisville, this is another terrible result that dooms you to ninth-dom yet again. But, like, under the hood, you're, like, not bad.
You're second place on XG differential per game at the moment.
You're, like, good.
I mean, this is just such a 180 from last week when we were like, this team isn't interesting. This team doesn't have any sense of identity. There's nothing to pay attention to with this group. It seems like all you got to do is get Sav DeMello healthy again, and you start Janine Sonis in the 11 and get Flint back in there, and it's night and day. You know?
It's almost like a team, if they have one superstar who everyone keys on, isn't very good. But if you have to defend 3-4 really great players, you're suddenly a much better team. And Louisville, like, had such a good game plan to get at Portland. We were talking about, like, whether Rob Gale's a problem or not. Like, this was, he didn't learn a lot. This is a new game plan, and he doesn't have an answer for this kind of game plan that Louisville executed. Because, like, Portland is coming off a pretty good win against Gotham, and Sam Coffey may have needed rest, but there was just nothing in that midfield for Portland.
Yeah, as an excused absence, so I don't know what that might be about. You see the drop-off in being able to manage the middle of the park when it's Fleming and Tina doing it together, and you don't have Coffey anywhere to be found.
Raylan Turner scored a Route 1 long ball goal, and you got 2 penalties.
Yep.
This was not anything like the performance midweek that drew praise. But also, unexpected points, maybe this is 2 of the best teams in the league. I don't think that's real. I don't think that's real at all. I think your teams definitely suck more than that, but, early days.
I mean, a lot of that expected point stuff is penalties. So, like, Portland slides down to mid-table on XG differential per game. Dana Castellanos was barely in the box. You were ostensibly playing her as a number 9. Kaya Hanks, I think, had a bit of a quieter match than she did midweek, and Raylan Turner barely got on the ball despite the goal. So that's not good. That's not good at all.
Well, it was a very chaotic weekend. I am so excited about us finally getting to the point where we can say some of these things have stabilized. This part of the season is always like a little jittery. It's like that second cup of coffee you had too quickly. Period.
I've really been feeling that quite strongly. So, yes, come our episode that will put all of this together comes out on Tuesday, May 20th, and I've got that circled on the calendar in bright red ink. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Be sure to rate us 5 stars, review us, and follow us on your podcatcher of choice. Tell all your friends about us if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to our Patreon, where $6 a month or $60 a year gets you 4 bonus episodes every single month, as well as access to our Discord server and access to our semi-regular YouTube live streams. Follow us on social media at XOwnGoals. That's the letter X Own Goals. And if you believe we've made an own goal, please email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. So we will be back with you on Thursday for Patreon, and see you next week right here on Main Feed.
Yeah.
Bye.